Welcome back to Fitness or Fiction. Today we're going to continue our series, our 3-part series on how to grow your biceps. 12 rules for life. So what are we on, Mr. Howden? Number 9?
Rule number 9er. Talking on a walkie-talkie.
Listen to people as if they're going to say something that you don't know.
Yeah, listen as though people might know something that you do not.
What's that mean to you? Break it down.
Let's break it down like this.
Wooka wooka.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I think it's really interesting the amount that I deal with people prejudging other people. Like from a simply sales perspective, I've been involved in personal training for a lot of years, and a lot of that has been showing people how to grow a business, which is customer service and whatever else. And inevitably, it will involve, are they going to be your client? Are they going to pay you for your service, right? The amount of times that I've discussed with people, like, don't prejudge, don't assume people don't want what you have, don't assume they don't have money, I think assumptions are really what it's talking to here for me. It's like, if you prejudge somebody and think like, well, yeah, I know this, or they don't have anything to offer or anything, that actually just negates any value that they might be able to add for you. So to me, the way that I read this one specifically is, if you leave space and leave curiosity, oftentimes people are going to present you with things that A, can change your perspective, and B, add to your life and likely theirs. Like the whole enterprise, in my opinion, is how is it that I can live the best that I can and add into other people's lives along the way? Like that's what kind of life strikes me as. What did you read when you read this one?
Partially, I feel like society is so, right now, go, instant gratification, and there's an abundance of information out there like that. I think you said it best, that people actually identify with their beliefs so strongly that when they're presented a new information, they're resistant to want to believe it, because I already believe this. Like, I already believe this, and you're telling me things have changed, and people aren't open to those new changes, so they're not even going to listen to the possibility that things could be different. There's a different solution or a different proposal on the table. And so I think people, like, if you're telling me something about my knee, like, oh, Curtis, my knee's been damaged for 5 years, and the doctors told me it's not going to get better, and I'm going to need surgery. And you're like, well, I don't know, you might not need surgery. My brain's instantly going to just identify, well, the doctor already said that I need surgery. So I'm just going to tune you out. No matter what you say, I'm not even listening. Like, I'm hearing you, but I'm not listening to you about the solution. That's just one way of looking at it. Another one could just be general life values, though. Like, it doesn't have to be sales specific or fitness specific. It could just be anywhere in life. Just listening to people and seeing. I think people are so concerned and wrapped up in their own thoughts. They want to get their own thoughts out that they're not willing to listen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it. Well, when people get too wrapped up in kind of where they're coming from, it does get hard to connect. And I think that's what it really comes back down to. Like, it ends up being a scenario where you limit your ability to add value to others and have them add value to you if you negate the possibility that you have common ground. And really, when we see polarization and people working at odds with each other and different people groups having challenges and things like that, if they just stopped and were like, okay, how many things do we have that's similar first? Be like, listen, you care about your family, I care about my family. You want what's best for your kids, I want what's best for my kids. You want what's best for our country, I want what's best for my country. Okay, beautiful. Like, we have a lot of common ground there. You care about your health, I care about my health. You like yoga, cool, that's great, you're moving. I like weightlifting, that's cool, that's common ground. Like, you can treat it as a separation, or you can treat it as like, here's how similar this is. And if you can see eye to eye better, like, why is it that you like yoga? What does it do for you specifically? Well, it allows me to connect with my body. It's like, yeah, weights do that for me. That's cool. But yeah, the whole idea of recognizing somebody else's humanity and how similar that can be, I think finding that common ground just makes things so much easier in so many capacities.
I think a lot of people say it's easier to see the differences because they're much more in your face than the similarities, which is why the common ground is hard to come together on. Do you believe in like a cognitive decline, like decision fatigue at the end of the day? Like the more decisions, the more information, just the longer your day gets, the harder it is to either take on new information or process new problem solving. So I think as well, because we're doing more, like we're working, you know, the old generations will be like, oh, we used to work really, really hard. Well, like we work hard now as this generation, but in a different way. We work more efficiently. Our cell phones give us more power to do more tasks faster with like faster processing power. And I think people almost, even the way social media acts and just cell phones, it's creating a quicker cognitive decline. So at the end of the day, I might not be interested in listening to your story, because I know I've definitely had situations where somebody's talking to me about something, like you're telling me a story about the weekend and how the weekend was, but my brain's still thinking about the crap that I went through. And I'm not really listening. Again, I'm listening, or I'm hearing you, but I'm not listening to you. And that almost is another way of not even being open to what the person's saying, just through sheer decision fatigue.
Well, yeah, and willpower is finite too, right? Like throughout the day, you flex that muscle, it's going to get tired, and you're more likely to make poor decisions in the later part of the day as far as your health. It's well documented, right? But I think it's really interesting when you look at the amount of things you can accomplish now. It's like, oh, just do this on your cell phone. It only takes a second. It's like, yeah, true. You can accomplish so much more. I can have my groceries delivered. I can do this. I can have something. I ordered a projector last night. It got here today, right? Like it just means that the pace moves faster and you can do more things in a day, which is, even if it's not physically more fatiguing, it's mentally more fatiguing. There's more on your plate, right? So yeah, this one I really like the idea of, like, you know, treat people as though they have something to add. And the other side of that is, if you treat people like they have something to add and you could learn something, they're more likely to treat you that way. And think about how fulfilling it is if somebody comes up to you and says, oh yeah, well, I've had this problem for that long and whatever. And you look at them, you say, I've dealt with that with some clients before. And they look at you and they're like, tell me more about that. What did you do? What do I do next? When they start treating you like, oh, this person might know something I can glean, that sort of respect builds the relationship too. It's like, it opens up space for you to be like, here is some honest answers. I had a client here and we did this, we applied this, and the shocking thing was the outcome was not what we expected. The outcome was so much better based on the simplicity of the input. And when they start paying attention, like it really is something that could work, man, it opens up tons of space. It feels great for both parties, I think.
Yeah, I think everybody listening, including yourself, has all dealt with somebody that's more open-minded and somebody who's a little bit more closed-minded. And
yeah. Well, and open and closed is like that same idea. Is connection even available?
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, that one, it speaks again to like kind of relational pieces for me, where it's like, yeah, is that something that's important? Yeah, I absolutely think that works on both ends or both sides of the street.
To that point, again, it's challenging to actually always be open-minded, and it's challenging to always listen to people, like different opinions and stuff like that, because again, once you kind of lock in your belief system, you can almost tuck it away in a mental filing cabinet and be like, okay, I have this figured out. I know what this is, and now I can deal with other problems that are on my plate, because that one's in the solved case file. And then if you bring it up and say, oh, Eric, actually, you know, that's actually not a real thing anymore. It turns out that there's new research out and it's X and Y and this is the new data. And then I have to pull that filing cabinet out and like reorganize my mental files and be like, oh man, things have changed. Like I run into this problem all the time with when I talk about health and fitness with like our parents or our grandparents. Like, oh yeah, you know, we don't really do that anymore. They're like, well.
It is hard to confront something that you hold in high esteem or hold to be true, because like you said, you got to pull the filing cabinet out and things get worse before they get better, you know, and challenging something that you've always had like tucked away, this is straightened out, it just brings up a lot of emotions too. Like I did all these actions, what does that mean about those actions, like in that time that I spent, and like all of these things, it brings up a lot of stuff, and I get that. But
No, you're not supposed to put your knees over your toes, Curtis.
Yeah.
You got to lift with your legs, not your back. Don't lift with your back, Curtis.
Well, the interesting thing is, like, the outcome of not getting that information means you keep going down a pathway. Like, I wouldn't even worry about how long you've been doing something a certain way. It's more about how much more am I going to invest in a faulty system, right? And I get that it's hard. It is really hard, like having your worldview challenged. But like in the world today, there's a lot of like this cancel culture and freedom of speech conversation, all this sort of stuff. And a lot of that stuff I find challenging. I do find it challenging because the way that people connect is working through challenging stuff. Some of the best relationships I have are stuff that we had challenges to work through, whether it was because of each other or with each other against something else, right? I just wouldn't want to take that away from people. And for my kids, I want them to be durable. I want them to be able to hear different points of view and realize that their self-worth and their viewpoint can still be valid even if there's somebody that disagrees.
You know, I think about this in a weird position of either sports or video games because I enjoy both.
That's fair.
Sports or video games. Playing a football game, like if you're playing football and you're like, I played a lot of football mostly in school.
Yeah.
If we just stomped the other team, it was enjoyable for like the first little bit, like, oh wow, this is a stomp fest. But after that, it kind of starts to just get boring because there's no challenge. And then you almost start to feel like, oh, you know, like this wasn't even, there was nothing, no feedback. And then if you actually have a game where the game's actually close and there's something on the line, and it's like, even if it was like, yo, the bell just rang, we all have to go back to class now, but game point, next point wins, all of a sudden it's like more energetic. There's something on the line. It's more exciting.
Well, it's almost like meaning is created out of struggle. Because you're not proving anything if it's not challenging, right? Like, oh, well, when's the last time that somebody was like, you know what? I can walk 50 feet from here to there, baby. Looks great. Like, no, nobody's seen a...
Good for you.
Oh, that's fantastic, dude. And listen, there's days where I'm struggling with my leg that I'll actually say something like that. But nobody's going to be excited for me because they don't really realize what it's like, right? But one of the things that you look at is like the stuff that people talk about and reminisce about for years to come is the stuff that was challenging, that they proved something about themselves, that they struggled against, right? So when I talk about my kids and their ability to be durable, like I want them to be okay when I'm not here, you know? And if I'm not there to look after them and they're with their peers, I want them to be able to stand up and be okay. And I think that involves a little bit of development on that side of things, which is, you know, let's talk about the other side. We don't have to agree with the other side, but do you understand the other side of the argument? Like I used to present my grade 11 kids when I was teaching the Korean War. A lot of people don't know much about the Korean War, but for
the record, Curtis used to teach social studies.
That's correct, yeah.
Nerd.
Yep, absolutely.
Go in, Korean War.
Yeah, so I'm teaching these kids about the Korean War, and I had 11 international baccalaureate program, and then I also had 11 like the lower category, not like the high category, the lower category. So pretty big separation as far as academic success with these kids. And I think it was actually even the 10 IB program was learning it, and the 11 like program was the other one. But anyways, it was a while ago. So I gave them a test question. It was a bonus question at the end of the test. And I said, okay, so at the end of the Korean War, what's a way that the Northern Koreans could have looked at this as a win? And the international baccalaureate kids, very few of them got it. A couple did, but very few of them got it. And they were like, well, of course the Northern Koreans could look at it as a win because they pushed the entire army back to where it started, right? A pretty easy answer. When I looked at the social, I think it was called Social 13, not Social 10, but Social 13 at the time. No, I was 23. It was the grade 11s, and it was the grade 10 international baccalaureates. But the grade 11s, when they got it, these kids were a little more street smart, it seemed. I don't really know the reason, but instead of like 4 people out of 28 got it, it was like more than half the class. Like, of course it was a win. They didn't push them anywhere. They came all the way back to where it started. I'm like, oh man, it's really interesting, like the differences in thought process, whereas like one group, they read the answer in the textbook and they're like, well, that is right. That's what I have to regurgitate. And then the other group, they were like, well, whatever, man. It's like, I don't know what the textbook said, but I'll tell you this, right? I think that's a really important thing to be able to kind of think on your feet and think from the other side. It's a really important thing and make your life a little easier.
Yeah, and part of that critical thinking is thinking about the other side and opposing viewpoints rather than just locking in and not even opening your mind to the possibility that something's different.
Well, even for me, I listen to a lot of podcasts. Big surprise. Sometimes, if I'm listening to something politically motivated, like somebody that covers political satire or something like this, I'll listen to somebody that's more right-leaning, and then I'll listen to somebody who's more left-leaning. And I'll listen to them kind of steelman their own arguments, right? And I'm like, well, where would I land on this? Instead of saying, well, I stand here, it's like, well, I don't know. I think they both have decent points, but I think the place that I would say is the most valid would be more on this side. But it's not just, I think it's a more challenging way to think, but I think it's more valid when you can think about things in a larger perspective. I think it'll make things a little bit easier to digest.
Yeah.
So
Number 10.
Number 10, be precise with your speech. What do you get out of that? I started last time. What do you get out of that?
There's a book that I really enjoyed. I brought it up on the podcast before called The 4 Agreements. In that one, he's kind of like not be precise with your word, but I believe he said be impeccable with your word.
Yes. Yeah. I like that book. Really simple premise, but I like it.
Being precise with your word, I think means you need to put a little bit of extra thought into what you're about to say. And I think you'll notice a difference. Not that I'm a king at it, but I use a lot of filler words like. But if I slow myself down and actually think a little bit about what I'm about to say, you'll kind of see somebody who's actually truly thinking on how to actually communicate rather than just word vomit everything that was on their plate and then see where the dice land. My wife is actually terrible for this. I love you. But she always gets so excited to talk and just so excited to say things. It's just like, and then she spits out a lot of words that are like wrong and communicates wrong. Like she'll call a pylon a pine cone. Like she'll be driving and be like, "Oh man, there's this pine cone on the road," and her brain's just moving so fast. Being impeccable with your word, though, being precise with your word, being impeccable with your word in the 4 agreements, he was talking about to not give air or breathe life into negative things. And I think that was a little bit more valuable than being precise. I think it's valuable to be precise, but that's kind of where I land on it.
I think sometimes it takes a second to hone down what you're trying to say to be truly precise, which is where this might come from.
Well, and another part of it is words are only half the story. Tonality changes on your words, and things can be ambiguous, like.
It's true. Like you can take different meanings from saying the same thing with just putting a comma in a different place.
It's even worse, especially nowadays over text message. If I came into the studio and I set the podcast up and you were out on the floor and you were working and I text you saying, "Yo, Curtis, let's go." You can read that. If you were having a bad day, you could read that in a bad tone and be like, "Eric's rushing me." But if you were just having a great day and you high-fived a bunch of people and you read it and you'd be like, "Eric's like, let's go." 2 ways to read it. It's the same words.
Well, and it's going to be filtered by your lens on how your day is going and then your lens on how they usually communicate, right? So it can be a little bit imprecise that way, but I think the idea of being precise, the more precise you are, the less tone matters, I would say. Like, for example, if I'm having a disagreement with somebody that's like a friend of mine or even Sarah, like, right? If I'm having a disagreement and it's like, listen, here's what I think. Like, I think this disagreement comes from this place. Let me summarize why I think we're having a problem. Let's be precise on what's going on. Why is this a challenge? Well, I think that you did this. It's like, listen, I'm sorry if you thought that. That's not what I'm intending to do. What I'm trying to say is the following. To be as precise as I can, my perspective is this, right? The more precise you are, the less your tone really plays into it. Like, the more generalized you are, the easier it is, I think, to misinterpret.
Yes.
So, like, even over text message, like if you're using your commas in the right place and giving punctuation and like taking your time a little bit, it's a lot harder to read a particular way. It still happens, but I would say that it's less likely the more precise you are. Like, hey, just got here, looking forward to getting started. That's like That's pretty clearly a positive message, right? You know?
In situations like that too, I think being precise is also framing and stating the obvious. It might sound cheesy, but if I'm in an argument with Diane sometimes, and say if she's really upset, say I've hurt her feelings and she's upset I did something, even if it was like my fault, if it's my bad, but we're trying to work our way through the argument, like you said, like you're trying to really lock things down.
Summarize.
Sometimes I will frame things like, Diane, you are my favorite person on the planet, and I love you more than anything. This is what's like going on though, but that doesn't take away from all this. Like I'm still your number one support system. Like I'm still your number one. And that's being precise by like really just, it's like a cloud of like, this is the problem, but this is the big picture. You know what I mean?
Well, I like the idea of summarizing, paraphrasing. I got that from life coaching with Ken Larson.
Yeah.
And he would be like, okay, sit down with somebody and ask them this question, and then I want you to summarize and paraphrase what they said to you back until they tell you a 10 out of 10, that's what they said. And it was taking people between 3 and 8 tries to get the right statement.
Yeah, and that's a weird one too, communication. I love that life coaching course. I really enjoyed it. I took it as well. They'd even say like, you can't identify somebody's why until you ask them 5 times. So it's like, oh, Curtis, why do you love personal training? And you're like, well, because I love exercise and I love helping people. And be like, cool, why? Well, because it makes me feel good and
Why'd you
blah,
turn
blah,
into
blah.
Bill Cosby?
Blah, 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 blah.
Jello pudding.
But yeah, I used to, when I was managing at the gym, I used to teach trainers to like ask why.
Tons of times.
Multiple times. So it's like, why do you want to lose weight? Well, because going up the stairs is really hard. Well, why does that bother you? Well, because it makes me feel like this. Why do you think it makes you feel like that? Well, but and you just go deeper.
Well, and that just speaks back to like the whole concept of listen to people like they might have something to add, because when it comes to themselves, they do. But depending on how deeply they've thought about a certain topic, they might not get to what they actually think immediately, which isn't a them thing. It's also the way that you're questioning, which is sometimes watching lawyers work is hilarious because they're great at asking questions, right? But the whole concept here about being precise, it's like, I think that it comes back to a few things. And first of all, if you're being really precise, people can know better where you stand, and so you can orient yourself with those people better. They get where you're coming from, but because you're being precise, you're going to understand how they feel better too, which is a good thing, right? And then the other side of being precise with your words is like, if I've thought something through sufficiently, I'll be able to put it in less words and be able to hit the nail on the head better. So being precise with your words involves a little bit of backup. And when I think about initiatives that I've done with my business or programs I've developed for my clients, some of the programs that I have for my clients, they're a culmination of years of work. I've made a few like summarized charts on how to set up, like specifically working the hamstring and things like this, and like grids of how it works. And I'll sit back and look at it and be like, this has taken me 10 years to organize and deliver like this. That is shocking.
To deliver the precision of what you're trying to communicate.
That's right. Yeah, like the amount of thought that goes into putting that in a precise setting. I think that it's not only good relationally, but it's also good for honing your own skills and your own understanding of things.
It's funny too, because you'll see the wishy-washiness. If I was a little gossipy, not that I even know who the person was, but one of my clients came to me one time. He's like, oh yeah, my other trainer said when I'm doing bicep curls, I should take my pinky out to my shoulder because just get a sick pump that way. I'm like, why should you turn your wrist, and why should you try to take your pinky out to the shoulder? Like, what did you say was the value of that? He's like, well, you just said like it hits the bicep better. Like, I don't know. It's like the guy didn't, like, he had an understanding that there's value there, but he couldn't truly communicate exactly what the value was. Yeah. You're king of the biceps though.
The funny thing about that is, as you ask people about the information, they have to think about it deeper. They realize that it might not be the magic they thought it was. And you can actually see visually what happens. They're either going to fight against it or they're going to seek to understand more. And with exercise, it's really funny. I'll call somebody into question on the way that they squat, and they get emotional about it because it's a belief system they've formed over years. Well, my trainer told me this and whatever. I'm like, okay, but you can squat like that, but why are you choosing to do that? Well, they said that's how you do it. It's like, well, first, listen, Depends on the application. It really does. It's a bigger picture than you think. If you do it this way, you're going to get this. That way is going to get this. Open up your stance, bring the toes in. Like, there's all sorts of things you can change that'll elicit a different result. So have you thought about the result you're going for with this squat? Because there's no such thing as just yes and no.
And that closed offness, again, I think is just that belief system in the filing cabinet getting challenged. I was actually requested by one of my peers a couple years ago, hey, Eric, I'm going on vacation. Can you look after my client for me and see if you can help their squat? I've been having a struggle like getting them to squat like just at a higher level in general. Like, they just need to improve it. It's not working. I don't know if it's like the foot stance or the hips are tight or whatever, but can you help me out? And I'm like, sure. And I started training that client and I started tweaking them around, doing some stuff, and the like client got defensive, like, no, my trainer said this is how I'm supposed to do it. And I was like, oh, your trainer specifically requested me to help you fix these problems, not for you to tell me that you know what you're doing. Like, but they weren't open to another set of eyes or another opinion because they already had it locked in this way, right?
Yeah, they'd already put that one to bed.
Yeah,
I hate when people talk about research like that. Let me just put this one to bed once and for all. It's like, no, that's not how it works. You're misunderstanding how research works. Like, the best answer we've come up with so far is this in this application. That's the best you're going to get. It's not, I'm going to put this to bed.
I'm going to make a series for Fitness or Fiction, Put It to Bed, and we're just going to put research to bed.
Oh, jeez. You're going to hurt my feelings.
Number 11? Sorry, you wanted to
We
finish.
are at 11. Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah. We better move on to the next rule. Rule number 11. Do not bother children while they're skateboarding. It's my turn to take first crack at this guy.
Crack away. I think it's funnily worded because when it talks about precision, don't bother kids when they're skateboarding, but
I think what this one is speaking about is risky play. Skateboarding is risky play. Bothering children while they're doing risky play is not a good choice. It's not going to do them any good, right? And the reason it won't do them any good is either A, you're going to distract them, or B, you're going to stop them because you're afraid of them hurting themselves. Now, I see a lot of this, like a lot of it. So the childcare that my kids go to, Fit Kids, Susan Toe runs it. It's an amazing facility. They do craft, learn, fitness stuff, and exercise or activities, and repeat, right? The kids come home with all sorts of things. Will's learning cursive writing, and he's doing that with Susan, the one who runs the day home, and he loves it. He didn't used to like writing because it's hard for him. Now he loves it. And this is at Fit Kids. He's done lacrosse. He's done all these cool things. But she said something to me one time that was really interesting. So my son, Lucas, he's 5. He's in kindergarten. She said at the beginning of the year, most of these kids try to climb this tree and they can't do it. And a bunch of them were trying and they couldn't do it. And then I looked up and I saw Lucas there and I was like, hey, Lucas, come show these kids how to do this. Same age, rolls up, climbs it on the hard side, goes all the way up. And then a parent came over that was like, I would freak out if you ever let my kid do that. And I'm not trying to be disparaging here, but the interesting thing for me is like I stand on the exact opposite side because there's so much involved in that story. When Susan told me that story, I was like glassy-eyed because that's Lucas stepping into confidence. That's him knowing that stuff that he's worked on and practiced, he can execute and he can show his peers, and he goes about showing them how to do it. And for the risk of him potentially falling, he's gained so much there that goes so beyond just the physical act of climbing that darn tree. So I would, in my view, I just wouldn't want to take that away from him. And I wouldn't want to overprotect him to a state where, let's say he did try to do that and he fell and he didn't know how to fall. Like, I feel like there's so many outcomes from not letting him do that outweigh, you know what, he could hurt himself, he could, but if he learns how to do this, the chances go down, and on the other side of it, he has all of these things to take up. I really think that overprotecting a child does them no favors because the world is not going to protect them very much.
Yeah. I agree with you. I also think that's a weird one because when you start bringing in business and the world into this conversation, there's liabilities and injuries. And because if that story went, how tall was this tree for context?
Well, it's not the world's biggest tree or anything. Like, he's only like 8-10 feet up. But like that's enough for a kid to hurt themselves.
So that's what I mean. Like, the story might be different if he did fall and hurt himself. You might have been like, what the hell? Why did you let him do that? Maybe you wouldn't have. I don't know. Other parents definitely would, though, and that's a liability issue. So that's a weird one. But I do agree with you, because I used to climb trees that were 20 feet tall, kind of thing.
I was in poplars that were like ridiculous, taller than my house.
And at my grandparents' house, we used to do obstacle courses up the apple tree, on the fence, onto grandpa's boat, onto the garage roof. And then my dad taught us how to jump off of the garage roof, tumble and roll into the grass. And grandma was like, Ken, like, what the hell are you teaching those boys? Why are you teaching them how to jump off the roof? He's like, because I'd rather them be proficient at jumping off the roof and stay safe and know how to, rather than one of them slip and fall and not know how, or try it on their own because the other one did, but one knew how to do it and the other one doesn't and hurts himself.
Yeah, it's this game for me where it's like, man, I think calculated risk is very important for kids. I really do. And, you know, people can say little boys, little girls. I'm not even going there, man. For little kids, calculated risk is important. Is this something that I want to undertake? Do I have the competence to do this? Is this the right level for me? Is it just outside of what I'm capable of right now, or is it too big of a risk that I shouldn't take it? Like, these are things that I think kids need to know, because their brain is not finished developing, especially for little boys, until they're 24. For girls, it's sooner, because girls are just smarter, I think. Speaking as a man, I think girls are smarter. But when I look at this, I'm like, well, I want my kids to be able to look at a risk and decide whether it's close enough to their competence level that it's okay.
Yeah.
And then I want them to be able to practice things, make that choice, have the confidence, and all the other characteristics that go along with doing that, to be able to, right? So it's not a right or wrong answer, and I wouldn't purport to say that. But for my kids, you want to know why Susan let Susan do that, or why Susan let Lucas do that? Susan let Lucas do that because she knows me. And she's seen me let him do stuff like that. And she knows that I'm on board for that.
Yeah.
And she also knows that he is competent, which is why it really hits me in the heart.
I think this is a conversation as well that has that ambiguity to it, because it really depends on the task at hand, who the parents are, who the kids are. Because even just parenting in general, like me and Jackson, when we roughhouse, he's 1 year old. And when we roughhouse, not saying we play super hard, but I'm very confident in my ability to toss him around, throw him around, hold him upside down.
Oh, yeah.
We're quite a little competent, athletic little bunch, but not all of my friends who have kids feel that competent, even in their own situation. Like, sometimes I can toss you a tennis ball, and I could rip a tennis ball at you, and I'd have pretty good faith that you would catch it, but I can give it an underhand toss to some people, and they're just going to stumble, bounce, and not know how to catch it. So proficiency in, like, athletic endeavors it's quite different, and it seems like it's a dying art in society now. If I was to take a crack at this subject, let kids skateboard, I don't even think about it on the risky side of things. And that's because partially right now with my son Jackson, and I think all kids, when they hit a flow state playing, whether it's puzzle or it's skateboarding or it's coloring, I feel like you should just let them sit in that flow state and experience that delightful sense of just focus and being in the moment and fully locked in on a task. Where even now, like myself, if my son is independently playing, I have this like desire to like want to go and play with, like, oh, Jackson's playing with that, I should go play with him and like do stuff with him. But at the same time, like, he needs to learn how to kind of be in that dedicated flow state, because if we always interrupted him when he's playing, it's going to kind of create a pattern of interruption. So to me, it's more of like a flow state issue more than just, I like the scary play or the risky behavior like you're talking about, but I think there's something to a flow state. Even if they're skateboarding and not doing something risky, maybe he's skateboarding, but he's really trying to figure out how to flick the board a certain way. And it's that if you interrupt that flow state, it causes problems.
Yeah, even if it is risky, interrupting it does cause problems. That's kind of where I'm coming from. And when you look at skateboarding, the amount of success that kids have to, well, people in general have to receive to continue working on a trick, it's just under 10%. And it lines up really well with slot machines, which is weird. But when you look at the amount of success they have to experience to continue to go in that pathway, it's pretty low, man. Like when you see somebody skateboarding, you should be like, oh man, good for them, because it's hard. Like it's really hard. And the success that they get, they'll try a kick flip 100 times and they might get it like 8.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it really does build a lot of qualities in there, like resilience and things like this. And even if it isn't risky, maybe just let them be there. Like if they're zoned in on something, let them be in the moment, because there's value to that.
Yeah. They're learning, and they're learning about themselves as well.
Yeah, big time.
Whether, again, it's coloring or sports.
We got one last one, and this one's I don't know. I think I know why it's last. Pet a cat when you encounter one in the street. I'm glad you get to start on this one, man.
I think this one's simple, and I kind of like it. I think it's... I'm a hippie, so to me, I think it just means slowing life down and appreciating the little things. Like I think of a cat on the street that wants to be pet and just wants a little bit of extra love from a stranger, if you will. It's like when I walk the dog, most people, or if I just walk in the neighborhood in general, most people don't even look at you or say hi to you. Until I go to the rich neighborhoods, and everybody's friendly.
Yeah, not in Skyview Ranch or Temple. Ooh.
In the hood. Yeah, so I think it's about smelling the roses. It's a smelling the it's a different way of saying smell the roses.
Yeah, I think living in the present is kind of what it's getting to, and you realize some of the blessings around you. Now I got a little anecdote. You know how I have anecdotes here and there. We got a cat recently, and we were dog people, right? And I told Sarah all the reasons we can't have a cat, and then she's like, no, we need a cat. Will wants a cat. We'll get one that doesn't shed, get automatic litter. She solved all the problems I had. I'm like, fine. This cat loves me. And Sarah always sends me memes on like the most unbreakable bond in history, a father and the pet he didn't want.
Yeah, it's true.
But like,
it's so true.
There's no other sensation of when a cat decides to come and sit with you, because they do what they want.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want anything from you except for your attention. Mm-hmm. And so I think that just seeing what's out there and seeing that there's value sitting there for you, it's super valuable, man. Like it's a pretty simple one for me. Live in the moment and experience the beauty that's just sitting there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's all. That's all for me.
Well, if you're still here, thanks for making it this far with us. We'd really appreciate like, comment, subscribe, all these things. If you have any requests for future episodes, we are hitting a new one next week, so look forward to that. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate your support.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you would subscribe, follow, and throw us a like on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.